Okay, we start off with our piece of fabric that we want to be as our top fabric that we'll be sewing through or needleturn appliquing. My piece of fabric isn't square, but you will have a square piece of fabric that you will fold horizontally and vertically. I'm lining it up against the selvage here. I'm just being a bit cheeky with myself. So we want a horizontal and vertical crease to find our center point. This makes it easier when tracing the template, as we have to trace and flip to get the full shape traced. So you'll see that there's a top mark on the template there. Keep that at the basically the top and bottom. You'll see when I flip it around. So basically trace this outer edge. And this is where I'm tracing now is actually the edge of your quilt, because we're going to fold the binding around to the front. It's basically, there's no seam on the outer edge. Flip the template over, trace that template. And continue around tracing the whole shape. Excuse my little fuzzy head coming through there. I'm not going to talk the whole time you see me do work here, so I don't need to fill the air with any noise, so you can just watch me do the tracing. So I'm going to trace this, and again you'll see it's a little tricky for me because just my lighting's low, and that grey fabric I can't see my creases clear. You don't want to marry those creases, so you don't want them to be hard ironed or anything like that. So that's the outer template. Next up we're going to trace the frame, so part of the design. Again, you'll see the dashed lines match up on the creases in our fabric, and we trace that all the way around for all four. So we just trace the outer edges of these. We don't trace the vertical and horizontal line because it's a frame, like a picture frame, cameo frame. So we just trace the two scalloped frames. So we do that for that side, and then we, clearing it up, flip it over, and continue tracing the frame around all four quarters, flipping it around as you go. Keep in mind of the top of the frame, it's skinnier at the top, as you can see, than it is in the middle. It gets wider in the middle. As we're needleturn appliquing, it doesn't really matter what pen you use because you will be turning those trace seams over, but you do want a fine line. So use either a mechanical pencil or a fine fabric pencil, or I do use a friction pen with a fine point sometimes. Just keep in mind that if you are going to iron your project during the appliquing, which I generally don't, but if you happen to, you will lose the lines you've traced. So if you're going to use a friction, just keep that in mind. But I find friction's fine for this sort of project. I'm actually using just a mechanical pencil from a stationer's here with a soft lead, so I don't have to press too hard. So just keep tracing all the way around the project. Now we trace our centre flower, and again there's centre lines to mark up the flower. I'm going to give two flowers in the pattern. One that's a slightly bigger, that might be a little bit easier to applique if you're newer to this style of applique. But fusible applique would also work really well for this project. You could just trace the frames and fuse the shapes on if you wanted to do that. I might do a sample of that another time, but not for today. So yeah, trace around the outer edge like you have wherever else. When tracing on the leaves, just leave about 1/4 inch gap, slightly bigger, so that there's room to turn under the seam allowances for both the stem and also the leaf, and they don't get in each other's way. It is fairly snug in there anyhow, so just be aware of that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, I'm not lining these up any way special here. I'm just getting them slightly above the stem and outside from the flower. So, and I'm not I don't want them to line up perfectly. That's okay. You won't notice it in the quilt. If it matters to you, you could try and line them up, but it's not something I'm concerned about. Okay, now we want to layer our fabric. So we take a smaller piece of fabric, that we've cut. This will be the show through fabric, the fabric we see come through our applique. Keep in mind, if you use a lighter coloured fabric at the top, that if you use darker at the bottom, you'll get some shadow through because we're not going to remove all the background. I don't mind some shadowing, but if it bothers you a lot, then you might want to consider what the top fabric is a bit more. So play with fabrics, layer them. So you just want to layer this so that you've got all the frame, basically. The scallop frame is covered by black, but the back has got fabric. And I'm not gluing the whole thing down. I do use a little bit of applique glue here. I just want to glue around the outer edges. The tools I use for this is I use some applique pins. You can use any brand you like. I've linked to the brand I liked in my pattern, and Roxanne's applique glue. You can use any applique glue. Just keep in mind that it's very strong, so you really don't need much. Now, for this project, because it's reverse applique, I'm going to glue just around the outer frame. So later on, once the project's finished, we'll be cutting away around the outer edge of this green fabric. So we're just gluing it now just to help keep it in place whilst we're stitching. So just press it down and let it dry in place. Give it a few minutes to set. The good thing about applique glue is you don't need much, you really don't, and it dries super fast. So just let it sit there and dry. Now from here, you don't have to pin the whole project like I'm about to show you, because if your pins will potentially stick into you. One way to stop this, and especially, is to roll the fabric up, like roll the corner of the fabric in like a little sausage roll, or what else would you call it? Like a tube. Just roll it as you like and get it into your palm, so then you don't have all the pins sticking into you. So basically, we want to pin so that fabric isn't shifting, because you can imagine if you get shifting fabrics, like when you base a quilt, you will get puckers or movement or distorted shapes. So we have the outer edge glued down, and we then pin on a flat surface. So like I said, you don't have to pin the whole thing. You could start from the center out, because we're going to start appliquing from the center out. So you could just pin, say, the center scallop and the center flower, and start there, and then add pins as you go. So put it down flat again, make sure it's all sitting clearly. At the end of the day, you just want to make sure you're not going to get any distortions. I will say with applique that having the right tools, and what I mean by the right tools is the right tools that work for you, but finding the pins and needles and thread that give you the best result. It's not a tricky skill. It takes a little bit to learn, but I find having the best needles, threads, and pins that give you the result that you're super happy with is the best thing ever. So I used to use a different brand of pin, but I recently converted to these Taylor Sevilles. I like that the heads are quite long and they're yellow. And they're short, but they're short pins and they're sharp and great for applique. They do take a little bit of getting used to the heads, but I just find them easier, especially as I'm getting older and my eyesight is not what it used to be. And I do a lot of day sewing, but I also do a lot of nighttime sewing under a lamp. So I just find these easier. And I have cats, so if I accidentally drop one of these, I can see the head really carefully. I'm really paranoid about pins and my cats in my house. So this isn't very sexy to watch. And like I said, you don't have to pin all this outside now. It's just how I work, and I do remove pins as I go, but it's just to keep it secure, stop things from moving around. You could try with this project, because it's reverse applique, try gluing parts of the frame, but you need to be able to cut into parts of it, so it could be a little tricky to do that. It's the only reason I haven't glued more. I've used more pins. So now we're ready to cut in and stitch. I'm pointing out here, what would you call it? Spots where I would start to stitch. You want to choose a starting point that's fairly flattish or easy to start. You don't want to start in a corner. You don't want to start on a heavy, like a point or a convex, a curve, like a short curve. You want to allow yourself a bit of run-up space. And I do find sometimes, even myself stitching, it takes a little bit to get my eye in. So you might want to have a little practice piece that you warm your hands up with and then go. But I'm going to show you now how I start stitching. So I'm going to again put the pin back in the center. I want to separate the fabric from the top fabric from the back fabric, because we don't want to cut the back fabric. This is where you have to take a little bit of care, and this is where applique scissors or small snips come into hand. So you just want to snip it away. You also don't want to be aggressive with snipping seam allowance down. You want to give yourself space, like leave the seam as long as you can and stitch it down as you go. This helps preventing fraying, and you will find, even though a shorter seam allowance feels scary at sometimes, it actually might give you a better result because you've got less bulk turning under. So if you find you're getting bulky turn under and you're having a hard time, snip your seam down a little bit, play with it, and just see how it goes. So you see here, I'm just snipping away. Now you don't snip away much as you just snip away like the first couple of inches as you go. And I'm going to snip the corner. And you'll probably find me as we go that I'll just keep snipping away little bits to get the result I want. So, and I'm going to start on a straight edge here. You knot your thread. I do use double thread, which might be controversial. It's my choice, how I like to sew. And I do use an 80 weight polyester thread called Deco Bob by Wonderful. And it is amazing for needle turn applique. Your stitches disappear. And so we take our needle underneath between the layers and it's knotted. And you will see my thread getting caught on pins. So if that frustrates you, I'm sorry in advance. And I will say with the caveat here that this isn't my natural stitching position, but it's the best for filming. So my hands don't work quite as well as if when I'm sitting on my sofa chair stitching for work. And so we use like the edge of our needle and we use our fingers. So you see how my thumb is helping me? I smooth it down and you take really small stitches. If you get greedy and start taking bigger stitches, what you'll find is you'll get bubbling in your stitching. So if you start seeing little bubbles, and you'll know what I mean by bubbles on the edge, you get little like dimples. That's because your stitches there's too much space between your stitches. So it's what I call being greedy because I did it when I started. So at first you're like, oh my God, I want to move faster and I want to stitch further ahead. You just basically want to focus on the first 1 to 2 inches in front of your hands. And just start stitching away. So I'm going to stitch up to the corner here and then I'll show you how we get around that. Notice that I get the fabric bunched into my palm. I'm not shy about holding it. You want good control of your fabric. When you get to the corner, you want to get right up to the point there and do a tiny little tacking stitch. And then I'm going to do another stitch, I'm pretty sure. Let's see if I do it. I'm doing a voiceover of my recorded video. Yep, you do. So you need the tacking stitch and that just helps anchor that point down, right? So it gives us an anchor point because we're about to pivot that corner under. And I'm going to snip a bit ahead here. And this is a concave, I'll get them mixed up, an internal curve basically. So curves that go under, down like this one, you need to snip into them. And you snip just up to the line you want to turn under, right? Don't snip over it, just snip up to it. And you want to snip about 1/8 of an inch, but sometimes smaller depending on what you're snipping, but about 1/8 of an inch apart. You want to do little snips. And then watch what I do with the edge of my needle here. I swoop it under. Now what I haven't demonstrated here is before I snip, you could have actually hand pressed that seam and then snipped it and then turned it, and that might help. And you just push your needle in like I've done. I'm going to turn the corner under. So hopefully you saw that. You might need to rewatch that little bit I just did then. And then if you've got a little bit sticking out, just get the end of your needle and push it down. And then at the corner, you want to take a little tiny stitch, again to anchor it and just make sure it's looking okay. And then I think I do another one, or do I continue stitching here? I can't remember what I did. It just depends on how it's looking. Sometimes I might do another tacking stitch. No, that's all good. So yeah, you basically need to do those little snips so that you can easily turn under the fabric. Now, if you find that your turn unders are looking sort of chunky, like they're looking sort of like jagged, like not a smooth edge, it could be you haven't snipped, put enough snips into your fabric. So you want to go in for about 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, a quarter is too wide, so a quarter of an inch. So you want to get those snips down, and you also, like I said, if your seam allowances, I'm just showing you the back side. You can't really see there, but you can see where my finger is. So I'm using my finger underneath to help push forward. So my finger underneath is pushing up, so where the stitching is. And so you just continue around, snipping and cutting, literally 1 to 2 inches in front of you. Don't try to work ahead too far. It gets messy and you will end up with messy seams. And I'm just showing you up close the stitching. Okay, I'm cutting now, cutting up to this bit. Now, like I said before, this is quite a small little template, so I'm going to give it 2 sizes. I'll give a larger size as well in case people don't want to tackle this little guy. He is a little bit fussy. So yeah, remove the fabric as you go. And just make sure, you might need to put some pins back in, take some pins out, and see how I grab the fabric up on my hand. You want to basically, yeah, get it confidently in your hand. And this is a tiny little curve, so you're just going to snip into it. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect because you can snip as you go and clean it up. You really do want a pair of little snips that have a serrated blade if you can get them. They do cost a bit more, but they're great. They grab the fabric, and so you don't get fraying when you snip. So the little serrated edges hold the fabric and give you nice clean cuts. It can make a big difference. So I'm going to continue making little snips all along here. And just take your time with it. What I'm about to show you is if I'm sewing left-handed, so when you're reverse needle turn appliquing, you're sewing anti-clockwise, and if you're right-handed, you'd be sewing clockwise. So this is for reverse turn needle turn applique. So if you're right-handed, you'd be going in the opposite direction to me. Again, you see that smooth under with the needle. It's so easy if you just get those snips. And you snip just up to the line, and then as you turn, the line comes under, and then everything's encased nicely. I do find that as soon as I turn the camera on, my hands just turn to not jelly because it's not nerves, but my brain just goes into overdrive. So sorry if some of this is not as smooth as it could be, but I think you're getting a good idea of how it works. This is my favorite part. It's called swooping seams under. It's like, it just feels like magic. I remember years ago when I first saw applique patterns, and I was like, over 20 years ago, I was like, I'm never going to be able to do that. And just with time and practice, I will say practice is what improves this sort of technique. So even if you can do like 10 minutes a day, and at first you won't get the results that you potentially love, but practice practice definitely makes improvement. So a small project like this is a great practice project because it's not a full quilt. You could just sew this in a square panel if you want to incorporate it into a quilt, but if you want to keep it as a mini quilt or as a placemat or a table topper, I am going to turn one into a cushion where I'll do a split back. So keep repositioning the fabric and stitching up to this next curve. We've already made our snips, so we just keep stitching around in the same way we have been already. It's very simple. Snip, stitch. So when I say very simple, it is simple. It just takes practice, like any skill to learn. You just take your time stitching away. It's probably one of my favourite ways to sew applique. I just love it. And once you find your hand and you start to enjoy it, you can see here I haven't snipped enough, so it's not turning under nicely, so I just have to check my snips. I'm just checking that little snip there. Yep. I'm just trying to get it positioned into my hand nicely. Make sure it's smooth. So take time to do that. Reposition it if it's not sitting right. If you find the fabric's getting closer to your face and you're scrunching up your shoulders, stop, relax, breathe, shake your shoulders out. Give yourself a minute. You'll find as you're learning, you might be holding your breath or scrunching up your shoulders. Just try and relax if you can. I know it's horrible when someone tells you to try and relax. It's annoying, but if you can do that. Again, I want to hold this with my thumb to anchor that corner. So I'm coming up to this corner now. It's a little tricky. So I'm going to swoop under that part. I want to put my thumb on it. Yep. And continue to stitch around. Okay, so we keep stitching around. It is a little tight in here, so just take your time, taking little stitches, and pins. I'm pulling out pins as I go. I'll put pins back in again, you'll see that. And I get up to that corner, so you're going to snip the I'm going to snip it down. You do what works for you, but I'm going to snip it right down to help. So you've got less to turn under. It's a small space. I'm just trying to get it comfortable in my hand there, and I'm going to hold it with my thumb, anchor it with my thumb, and then use the edge of my needle to flip that edge down and use my thumb to hold it in place. And then same as others, just swoop. And I've got a random thread there, which I think I'm going to snip in a minute. I was a little frustrated. I remember this at times, like, you little sucker. So snip it away. I hope you don't mind my kind of informal voiceover. I'd rather just talk at you how I like to, how I'm stitching in my head and just explaining it that way. So hopefully that's clear. And you just keep stitching up to that section, the point. Just making sure that I have all the fabric turned under that I wanted to, because it is quite a snug little spot. Doing a little bit of smoothing with my needle and continuing to stitch up and around. Well, the rule of thumb too with applique is that you the thread colour you use matches the top fabric that you're appliquing. But I tend to use a silver grey for most, unless I've got high contrast happening and I'm seeing too many stitches. But this wonderful Deco Bob 88 is really fine, so I don't see it. So I'm going to stitch up to the point. I'm going to tack it down. See, there's one stitch. I'm going to do another little tack to secure it. My thread's around the wrong way, so I'm just getting it my way. And then I'm going to spin my work around. So that's the other thing. If you find your work's not in a good position, spin it around. I'm going to snip that little tail off, and I'm just going to clean up my scissor cutting in here and snip around a bit. And then just continue to do the same thing the whole way around the rest of that flower. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me stitch the whole thing, but I'm going to just go down the side a bit. Okay, so now we're going to turn under this corner. So we've snipped, we swoop, and it is tight. So you will want short seam allowances to be able to snip it in. And you'll watch me here. I'll actually snip some of the inside fabric down. Just be careful when you do this, just to help. So I've got less stuff inside there to turn under, that I'm trying to turn fabric under into, if that makes sense. And this is a tight little space. So you'll see I'm like, oh, yes. Get your thumb, press it, and then use the edge of your needle to help get that edge in. I've folded some of this under, but I've got some sticking out, so I'm cutting the end. So as long as you've got some folded under, you can do a little snip, but just want to make sure it's folded under first. I'm just getting it all in. And this is because it's a small shape. It's not always so tricky. And then I'm going to start some stitching there. You just want to do small stitches, make sure it's anchored. I'm going to stop there. I just wanted to show you that part. Now I'm going to start to show you how to stitch the scallop. So you want to pick like a smooth edge, like a long edge. You don't want to start in a point. So I'm going to show you how to do the outer curve. Again, you might need to remove some pins. You want to separate the background fabric from the top fabric and do a little snip. We don't want to cut into the fabric underneath. Cut down to, so we're cutting away fabric because this is reverse Needleturn applique. And I just had to pivot it around because I'm left-handed and orientate myself. So we just want to start then to cut down to where we're going to start stitching. So we do want to cut to the seam allowance. Now I've cut this quite narrow here. If you're a beginner or newer, I would cut it wider and then snip it as you go. Don't cut as close if you're not as confident. And I'm just going to cut chunks away as I go so I can show you what's going on here. This is how I would normally do it. I'm going to roll my fabric up here so I don't stab myself, which I didn't do earlier. And then you're going to snip into that corner. Just take care, you snip up to the line, and I'm just going to snip off the little ears there. And yes, my Molly Duca left hand here. I'm cutting down to there. Okay. Take up needle and thread. Make sure the end of your thread is knotted. I'm rolling it into my hand. It's into the palm of my hand. Snip off any fabric that's in your way like that. Take your needle and thread and put your needle between the two layers. Bring the needle up at the line, just on the inside of the line. Yep. And make sure the knot tails are underneath. That's what I just swooped under. It's getting adjusted. Now, I did mention this before, but at this point you could also crease those seams with your fingers if you want to give the line a crease. I'm just decided that I needed more pins there because I just didn't want any distortion. And I think I had a couple more from memory. Maybe I don't. No, okay, I'm happy now. Edge your needle, and we don't need to snip these because they're we're not stitching inwards, we're stitching outwards. There's enough bias or curve on the seam to fold under. You'll find different fabrics respond differently. So Needleturn applique with Tana Lawn is amazing because it's such a beautiful fine fabric and it turns so beautifully. Some patchwork fabrics just don't love to be needle turned, so you'll soon know as soon as you start to needle turn something how it's going to feel. There's so many fabrics, so many different patchwork fabrics needle turn so differently. A woven patchwork fabric, like that's not printed, that just is woven, it will print differently. You want to be mindful of not using too loose a weave fabrics because they could be tricky to needle turn. You'll get fraying. So I'm just going to continue to stitch down here until I get down into that point, and then I'll show you how we navigate that. Okay, so we come down into this corner. We don't want to mess around with it too much. We want to swoop as normal, stitch down. And we've cut into that in that point, inverted point, so that's good. So we can turn that under as we come up to it. We don't want to fuss with it too much. We don't want to create more fraying fabric. So I'm just trying to get a good handle on it here. And I'm going to turn it under, use my thumb to help. Smooth it out. I haven't quite got it in the center there, you'll see. So I'm just going to probably do a stitch, see what happens. Another stitch. Get my needle in there. So you see how I'm getting my needle in it, under, and swooping it under. Okay. So you want to stitch up into that point. To get right down in it. And then from there, we just want to do a couple little leg stitches. You'll see I'm doing them here. Come just in a little bit, like 0.5 millimeter, just past the line, and just do a couple little legs, as they're called, and they will anchor in that point there. And then from there, take your thread. I'm going to get my scissors and continue to cut, and you just continue stitching around. Be mindful not to stitch the background fabric underneath, as you'll be very cross with yourself. And it's the same. We don't need to snip into it. It's an outer curve. I'm just trying to reposition my hands to get in a good position. And sometimes like this, it's like I don't have a great curves happening. So it just happens sometimes. I think at this point too, it was like I was struggling with my position because I wasn't not in my normal sitting position. So it takes me a little bit of effort to get good smooth stitches. and just continue up. It doesn't matter that's not a perfect point on the inside for this project. It really doesn't matter. You just basically want to get the scallop shape, which we're going to have, so that's perfect. And here I am, you see I'm navigating, I'm having a few little troubles. Sometimes like you pick up your needle and thread and it just like flows, and then other times like you're all thumbs. I'm having a thumbs moment here, it seems. I'm going to let you see it so you can see that it's not always smooth sailing, and I'm always learning myself as well. I hope you really learn to love this way of stitching. I love applique, whether it's reverse needle turn or needle turn. It's so fun. Also, if you try it and you don't want to do it, you could definitely do this project as a fusible applique project. So there you go, showing you how to navigate the curve and the inner point. And now I'm going to demonstrate how to do one of the leaves, just because they're so small. I'm going to make sure there's pins either side of the leaf so we don't get any distorted fabric. And then you're going to snip into the fabric and roll it up so I don't get pins in my hands. And then I'm going to snip into the fabric, and you want to make sure that you don't get that background. And it's a small space, so I want to snip into the top fabric only and cut it basically across point to point, internal point on the leaf. And then we just want to cut away a bit of the fabric on the inside and do our snips, because this is an inner curve. Rolling up so I don't stab myself. Snippity snip, about 1/8 of an inch up to the line. And you don't want to start stitching on the points, you want to start on the smooth edge. It's easier. So I'm just preparing. Take needle and thread, put the needle between the layers. You would have knotted your thread. No, and I reminded myself, no, I don't want to start in that corner. I want to start on one of the edges. It's just easier to start and finish not in a point like that. So swoop under, because we've done our little cuts. It doesn't matter if the leaf comes out a little bit bigger, so if you swoop a little bit more under, don't worry about that. As long as you keep the shape, use your thumb to press the seam, and then start stitching. And like before, we're going to stitch up into that point, taking care not to fiddle with it too much. We don't want fraying fabric. I'm just trying to get into a better position to show you. Stitch up to the fabric, up to the corner, sorry. Well, it's not really a corner, to the inner point. And I'm getting my needle underneath, so then I can bring it around and swoop that corner in and press it with my thumb to crease the edge. And then stitch 2 little leggies. I might have done 3 legs that time, that's fine. And then I'm going to snip the rest of the fabric away. Roll it up so I don't stab myself. And snip into the fabric and finish the leaf shape. And we're coming up to the end of the demonstration. I recommend you read the pattern if you're going to sew this project from start to finish. Have a read through, and then I recommend you watch the video all the way through and then start stitching if you're new to this style of stitching. I didn't realise it was going to be 38 minutes long, but it is. I didn't want to speed up any of the stitching, so I wanted you to be able to see how I stitch and continue to stitch. Thank you so much for joining me for watching this video. I really hope you like making Cameo Bloom. I've made a few of them now as samples. It's such a fun little sweet project, and like I said, it has multiple uses. You could use it for a table topper, dining mat, placemat, cushion. It could be a mini quilt. Thank you again, and happy stitching.